Welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast, where we talk to customers and experts about how to create products and services that feel like time well spent. And now, here are your hosts, experienced strategists, Dave Norton and Aranza Savas.
Welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast. I'm Aranza Savas.
And I'm Dave Norton.
And today we are going to look at the intersection between brand strategy and experience strategy. These two disciplines sometimes reference similar ideas and frameworks, but often don't end up complementing one another in execution within organizations. They don't end up in service of the customer. And so today we're joined by Catherine Clark, the co-founder of the branding agency Clark McDowall. Catherine has been a thought leader in brand strategy, architecture, and innovation since the 90s. And her work is really built on the fusion of art and science, of the left and the right brain, what she calls intelligence and imagination. Her work has shaped some of the world's biggest and most innovative brands. And we can't think of a better person to look at these questions with. So today we're going to look with Catherine at what brands must do in order to align the promises they make and the experiences they deliver. And as an added bonus, we're going to check in with Catherine about what she's seeing in brand research and strategy and how that can inform and inspire the ways that we think about the 6 key experience strategy trends that we've outlined in our 2023 Experience Strategy Trend Report. Catherine, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Aranza. It's an honor to be on your podcast. I'm very inspired by all the work you guys are doing and really excited about this conversation today, these disciplines coming together to create magic for people.
I agree. There is such a powerful complement when brands get it right. So to kick things off, let's just talk about what brand strategy is and what experience strategy is. So from your perspective, what is the purpose or function of brand strategy?
So it's very much a complementary discipline to the discipline that you specialize in, Aranza. We're really looking at the North Star, that vision. So it starts with, really understanding the business you're in. So you could define your business by saying, I'm in the business of, providing cable connection and internet and phones, or you could say I'm in the business of helping create connected life for people. So there's a definition of the business, there's a definition of purpose, which I think has been spoken a lot about in recent years around our why a company exists. It's the definition of our core target audience in a very sort of succinct, singular way. What is that core aspiration and how do we connect with that aspiration? It's the definition of our values and as well how that comes to life in terms of principles for expression and really the beginnings of brand experience. But it's very much an upstream discipline. And it tries to boil things down to something very simple that people can grasp and repeat and endorse. Whereas brand experience, and I'm sure you'll get into this, is much more nuanced and much more detailed, much more bottom up, really trying to be there for people in their different moments. So we're really coming top down to try and create that North Star and create some clarity for people who are working with a brand.
I love that. Very well said. And Dave, I want to ask you the same question about experience strategy as someone who literally wrote the book on experience strategy.
Yeah, when I think about When I think about experience strategy, I think about, of course, the business model. We have to think very directly about what business we're in. So that's an overlap a little bit with what we're talking about from a brand strategy standpoint. One of the key things that companies don't pay attention to enough, I think, when it comes to experience strategy is, do you have a point of view on what it is that the customer is going to want in the near term? Something that's unique, that's different, that's compelling, that will permeate everything that you do within your experience. And oftentimes the point of view can be completely unknown to the customer. We don't have to share it. Like on the brand side, we oftentimes share what it is that we're trying to accomplish. On the experience side, we don't have to share the point of view. The second thing from an experience strategy standpoint is you need to understand what is the customer need. Now, we often talk about that as the job to be done. And there are big strategic jobs to be done. And then there are small micro jobs to be done. So, Catherine, when you talk about the bottom up part of this, I think about those small jobs that have to be done to make sure that people get whatever it is on time. That's a small job to get done. But there are big jobs to be done. Those are often aspirational or functional or emotional jobs, and they're very big. And again, we may or may not share with the customer that that's the job that we're getting done for them. There's a dependency there, depending on what the brand is trying to do. And then the last part of what makes for a great experience strategy is the ability to look across and to really understand how all of these different channels are going to work together. How are the products going to work together? How are the services, the customer service, and all of the different parts? What role are they going to play in ensuring that the company is able to deliver in a way that is going to be successful? There's probably more to that I can talk about in a moment, but let's stop there for a second.
As I was listening to both of you, the thing that kept swirling around in my mind is, okay, if we're talking about a startup, it's really easy to see how this triangulation of customer need, solution, and brand story come together in a really organic way at the point of origin for a company. That said, I think most of the companies that are hiring both of you probably are existing brands and in many cases legacy brands that have a long history of innovation and evolution necessarily. And so from an innovation perspective, I think that's where it gets really tricky, right? So how do you take an old brand and reinvigorate it for a new customer expectation and experience? Or how do you take a customer experience and rebrand it to have renewed relevance? So Catherine, how do you rebuild that triangle in your experience? Or how do companies do that well?
A lot of it has to do with understanding what is really special and precious about your brand, but understanding that it's not a static thing. So you have a trend actually in your trend report about, uncertain is certain. And I think that's a rule that all businesses need to embrace, because we need to be constantly evolving, and we need to actually show up in the world in a way that feels like we're going to flex as people's needs evolve and as the conditions around us are changing. So one of the things that we have in our brand tool that is really helpful is this notion of character. Everybody's heard about brand personality, and brand personality is great, but it's a little bit limited because it's veneer, it's a little bit surface level. It's kind of what the exterior of somebody, if you like. And it also doesn't flex depending on, what mode you're in. And brands have all kinds of modes. And if you apply that to innovation, they may show up in a new way, maybe 10 years after they were created, when they launch new products or new services. So the character is kind of what's inside. It's the things that really define a person in the deepest possible way. And if you think about a person, and as they grow up, they will change, they'll have their career, they might have kids, or within a day they might go into different modes, but they're always truly themselves. Whereas their personality may appear slightly differently if they're in work mode or if they're in social mode. So defining the character is really key. And there's some of the things in there have to do with how that brand came about. How did it grow up? What were the big traumas that it experienced over its life? So we really use traits to define our characters that are more akin to what you'll see a writer use when they're developing a character, or even a forensic investigator when they're trying to understand a criminal. So thinking about it in that way, in deeper ways, helps because it allows you to have a rebirth and innovate and flex your experience and stay and yet remain kind of your true self.
I love that. And it taps very much into what we talk about in the trend report around authenticity and around customer purpose, right? So we expect brands to be an authentic embodiment of our beliefs and to respond authentically to what we care about. And so that is at a much deeper, more intimate level rather than it's sort of surface storytelling. Don't just tell me who you are, be who you say you are.
Yeah, I think I want to build on some of the things that you're talking about, Catherine, there. This idea that a brand is dynamic. I think that is so important in today's world. Many years ago, 20, 25 years ago, brands were kind of considered to be fairly static. I mean, at least the idea of brand image and brand personality, you didn't change those. You kept those as consistent as you possibly could. And I think there was a tendency to say that the brand experience was any experience where the logo showed up. So when you think about like brand experience and you think about Marriott, for example, and it seemed like the logo way back when was on everything, like on the soap. It didn't matter where you went. That's what we understood as brand experience. But today, what I think about the relationship between brand and experience is this give and take. Sometimes it's the experience that's leading the brand, and sometimes it's the brand that's leading the experience. And it really depends upon what's going on, where people are at. The type of people who are working on experience strategy today, this is a profession that has grown up. There's a lot of really smart people, and they understand the importance of brand strategy, and they understand the importance of experience strategy. And so they'll oftentimes, it's almost like a dance, they'll oftentimes make recommendations. This is what we're seeing that the customer is going to need. And then the brand adapts, and then the experience adapts, and we're working together, we're building upon each other. That's the kind of approach that I think we need to be looking at going forward.
Well, and I think if you continue with your dance analogy there, the risk is that they end up stepping on each other's toes.
Sure.
And so, right. Catherine is somebody who has worked with so many big brands and helped shape them as they extended to experience. Where do you see this fall apart?
So often it's when either the brand is too rigid in its definition and doesn't flex, like we were just saying, or the handoff, if you like, to what you would consider to be the brand experience team. So all the teams that come together to make that magic in the day-to-day. If it's just a handoff of a book, so here are the guidelines, here are the do's and don'ts, see you later, go figure it out. I think where it really needs to kind of happen is think about the brand strategist not as a director of operations or but more of a coach. So just tell our clients, yes, we can write you a beautiful brand vision that's going to flip the whole script and all of those things. But ultimately, where we succeed is if we leave you in a better place as an organization than you were before. So part of our job is to act as that coach and bring together those teams that make the magic in the experience and really start to engage them so they can work together and they can start to find their own rhythm. So it's not just about writing things down and shouting it at people. It's really about being a catalyst for those conversations and then respecting the craft of those people who are actually on the front line, making magic, inventing new things, coming up with solutions on their own. Because ultimately you want to get to speed. So you look at somebody like Adidas and the way they responded to the whole Kanye situation, 2 weeks of talking internally, and everybody felt that was very disingenuous. Whereas you look at Wendy's and they're just out there saying all kinds of outrageous things. And it feels like it's truly the beating heart of the brand. So our job as brand strategists is to boil it down, but then be able to be that coach for the teams that really bring to life the experience and understand the data and come up with all the ideas to make it completely intuitive for them so that they really are becoming the brand in their actions every day. So that's where I think the opportunity lies, is not stopping the job with the written word, but really creating feeling and then new behaviors, new collaborations within the organization.
You said something so simple and so powerful right at the end of that I want to double click on it, which is the experience is becoming the brand, and vice versa. The brand is becoming the experience. And so that's where I think this dance analogy is so beautiful, because it is this rhythmic passing back and forth of insight and perspective and interaction.
I do think that one of the things, Catherine, that you've talked about is really important, and that is this idea of character. See, by identifying what is the brand character, you're setting certain parameters for what is acceptable and what is not. And then you're allowing those that have to make decisions in real time to be able to work. And as long as they are reinforcing the character, you're good to go. That's part of the reason why Wendy's was so much faster than Adidas. I mean, their character has been long established, and their personality as well, from a social standpoint, has been long established. So they don't have to wait to check in with each other. They get it. They know what they're about, and they just make it happen. And they have permission. So there's not it. I think the other thing I like is you talked about brand guidance versus brand police, which has a totally different feel. But back in the day, that's what brand was about. It was about policing, right? And we've moved away from that, which is good. It's really good.
Yeah, it's interesting because you really can't have any authentic character if it's all about which words need to sit side by side one another in this precise color palette, and that integrity, the brand integrity and the identity integrity is so much truer when it's not about punctuation and capitalization, and it's about an expression of an individuality.
Yes, and in fact, we see a lot of guidelines that will have do's and don'ts in terms of what you say, how you look, how you use the assets, but it's also the actions that you take. Are you going to engage with something a little bit politically difficult? Are you going to engage with something a little bit dark and a bit depressive? Are you going to respond quickly? Are you going to respond slowly? Are you going to have arguments with people? It's not just what you say and how you look, but also how you respond and act, because you guys are really dealing on the front lines of all kinds of unpredictable situations. And actually that unpredictability is often the moment where your brand can shine. Is like, how do you respond to a pandemic, or how do you respond to a crisis? Those kind of things are when you build your deepest relationships with customers. So being ready with that is really important.
Yes, absolutely. And that does take an open line of communication and some integrity to be able to respond authentically. The number of people responding as a brand voice is so much broader than it ever was in the past. Because of the proliferation of channels. And instead of it just being like, here's your commercial that was mass produced and the whole team was there finessing every word and every little piece of the color palette, now it's this big team of junior people who are saying things, and who, one frontline employee can be your voice. And so there's just a whole lot more people speaking for the brand. So I think it just becomes ever more important that we all understand who we are.
And actually, if we learn a little bit from Gen Zs, they're valuing imperfection, and they're valuing sort of the realness so much more than the veneer, that actually you want your brand to have more interactions in those very unscripted moments than in the scripted moments. So that generation is definitely reshaping the way we need to show up.
Yeah, I love that we're talking
building,
about this because so much of experience is also delivered through the frontline employees, especially in service and experience related organizations. And so I think that is finding that place where we understand how to marry those two in the delivery of the hospitality employee or the salesperson in the retail technology space, et cetera, is I think really challenging for brands. But it
I
is the
totally
story.
agree. I totally agree. I think one of the things that you said, Arancis, that is really profound is the proliferation of channels has changed everything. For brand, now you've got to develop a voice that anyone can pick up on and work towards and understand. Even I love this idea of imperfection. From an experience strategy standpoint, the proliferation of channels makes the experience far more complex. People start and stop. They do different activities when they're in store than they do when they're online. They've got to talk to multiple people. And so from an experience strategy standpoint, understanding channels and what is the purpose of channels for the customer is just a really big deal. One of the things that I do worry about is that the proliferation of channels actually makes the experience worse or more difficult for the customer. And sometimes we have to replace channels and take them away and say, you know what, maybe we're not ready to do TikTok. Maybe we just can't do it. We're going to stick with our bread and butter, and we're going to be okay with that. And we understand why we're doing what we're doing. And that's just a communication channel. The same thing could be said for retail, right, as well. So
I want to talk about Southwest
really
Airlines for a second because we're recording this on January 10th, 2023. I don't know when you're listening to it out there, but poor Southwest Airlines, brand I love, has had a really rough month. And I think brand has been and experience had a really interesting moment here. So I just think it'd be fun to talk about it with the two of you. So we think about Southwest as a brand that is informal and messy and has made that a part of their consistent personality. So from the beginning, their origin story is of a guy who created this company in a bar on a napkin and then went off and won the first fare wars by giving people wild turkey. And now that plays out into fun, silly, authentic experiences in flight. I don't know, my super abridged version of that story. And that when you call the call center, you're going to get that same love attitude and that same voice. And what was so jarring to me as somebody who really loves this brand and this experience is that the contradictory stories were coming through their own employees this time. And it was one of the first times where I felt like they lost the thread, and I get why it happened, right? Like clearly there's some trouble in paradise. So there's no blame intended in this, but it was jarring because they've had a 50-year history of brand consistency that suddenly felt out of sync.
So much of it is making sure that you live out the promise that you make internally. So I think they became really good at being fun, being social, but really some of the things we loved about Southwest was their ability to problem solve and to come up with solutions that made people happy. And somewhere this problem solving ability internally probably kind of got eroded and didn't become a priority. And so there they were kind of caught off guard. So there's something interesting there, Arantas, about when we think about our ability to deliver brand experience, making sure that the focus internally that are sort of that companies invest in, whether it's their operations or their talent or whatever it might be, really matches up to that promise. Because somewhere they were riding on that, wonderful brand image that they had, but they forgot to invest in some of the essential pieces that made them special. And brand experience, when we come across it, is so dependent on different teams that are usually siloed working together. So somewhere they missed the investment in that ability to bring people together to solve problems.
It's interesting. It's interesting because they have always seen themselves as a bootstrapped kind of company. They build things up. They empower their employees to do things that are kind of crazy. In some ways, and I don't know everything that it has gone on, but what I have read so far, in some ways, this idea of empowering the employees was taking a step too far, because they empowered the employees, but they didn't give them the technology that they needed to actually rearrange the schedules. I mean, it was that simple. There was software, and these people were working with handwritten notes. Now that's not the same as empowering employees. And that was a big miss by senior leadership, and they acknowledged it. The CEO came out and said, "We missed." And I think that's what was really upsetting to the employees. They were being held accountable for something that they had no control over, really. So there's a lesson there for us, I think, from an experience strategy standpoint. We can request really big things of our employees, but we have to invest in the right technology to support them, and they just didn't do it. So that's all I know right now. I'm interested to see what happens kind of going forward. Be a great case study.
Absolutely. And to me, this whole story comes back to that second trend in the Experience Strategy Trend Report, which really is, I think, at the heart of what Catherine's been doing in her work, which is promises made, promises kept. So we promised employees empowerment. We did not deliver on true empowerment. Yes, we said, you can say what you want. You can make big decisions to support your customer. But as you pointed out, Dave, they didn't necessarily provide the technology in order to enable that. And I think, I don't know, Catherine, tell me if this is true or not from your perspective, having worked with so many brands from a brand perspective, because I feel like my guess is that a lot of companies come to you when they're struggling to fulfill promises, and they say, well, fix our brand.
But strangely enough, so we have one client that we worked with a few years ago who are very good friends of the company. We did some great work together. It's a company called Snooze. They were out of Denver, Colorado, and they are a breakfast restaurant that's expanded, nationwide, and they pretty much tripled in size after, we worked together. They had so much about their brand that actually it was virtually overwhelming. You couldn't quite get it into your head, but it was a very magical experience. So we helped them boil it down. And really for them, the magic of their brand was actually in the people serving you breakfast. The food's fantastic, but it's really about the people. And their whole thing was every moment is an opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life. So what they did is they empowered those people by saying, you can give out free pancakes, you can do these things, and really training them and creating this culture. Thank you so much for the visual. That's amazing. And so really that's exactly what they did, is they were able to, we boiled it down to what the essence of it was, but then what they did, it was really make sure that everybody they hire has enough flexibility in their job that they can make those very spontaneous moments happen for people. And it's not overly controlled. So back to the Southwest Airlines piece, how do companies make sure that they create systems and use technology not to box people in, but to actually allow that human decision making in the moment, that little post you're going to put on TikTok or whatever it might be, that will create that very, very human and somewhat irreplaceable kind of feeling that a brand can put forward.
I love how brand and a company like yours brings just such a wonderful perspective to the experience that then can be built upon. from there. And I love how you kind of talked about boiling it down, empowering the employee. But from the visuals that I just saw, it also looked like you were able to give them ideas. The employees had ideas. They were things that were suggested to them on ways that they could actually deliver this experience and make it special for the customer. And I think that's a really important role that brands can play.
Yeah, it's reminding me of a restaurant experience I had this weekend. I went to a Michelin-starred restaurant in New York called Attaboy, and it's a small single restaurant, super simple concept. It's a $75 prefix. That's it. No spirits, just beer and wine, a couple desserts, a couple potential add-ons. But we're all eating the same thing, and it's fairly difficult to get a reservation, so it's in demand. And I watched all the ways they were simplifying the offering so that the experience could be rich. And some of the ways I noticed were both, of course, the simplified menu and choice, but also it's a gratuity included restaurant. And so the entire team was partnering to give us a really rich and wonderful experience. And so they were experts in individual courses. So our courses were delivered by somebody who really knew and loved the dish and gave us a new way of experiencing and perceiving our dish. I think my guess is that they said, "Hey, Jane, you're really excellent at welcoming people and setting the tone of the journey." And so Jane was just going table to table and introducing the journey. And so there were these, talk about seamless handoffs, but each of them was really doing something that they cared about, that they specialized in. But that was only possible because they simplified the offering. Had there been 100 different dishes and each server sort of owning their part of the dance, there couldn't have been that beautiful rhythm.
I love that.
I love that, Aransas, the idea of from a business standpoint, simplifying your offering so that the experience can be multidimensional. So I just was at CES last week. One of our clients, Harman Automotive, they're owned by Samsung. They make the technology that goes in the car. And so their big thing this year was like, they're going to sell these car manufacturers very simple solutions that are turnkey. They can put them right in the car, whether it's like noticing when somebody's zoning out when they're driving, or measuring their heart rate, whatever those things are, but they're really turnkey. And then it allows that car company, so BMW or Mercedes or whoever it is, to assemble those different things and create this very bespoke experience for their customer. But they've simplified the technology piece for the client and saying, "Hey, we're going to give you ready-made technologies. You just assemble them how you want, and you focus on creating that whole experience in the car." Because ultimately the car is no longer about getting from point A to point B. It's really about getting people from state A to state B and really making, time in the car, time well spent. So you can start to see this thing you just mentioned from a restaurant happening on corporate level, simplify your product and make your experience much more complex in some ways.
Yeah, that's true.
Well said. So as we start to wrap up here, I want to get to the heart of this so that this guidance can be applied. A lot of the stuff we're talking about, frankly, is it's costly for companies to hire brand strategists and experienced strategists to come in and externally support this work. And for me, part of the mission of this show is to translate these really complex and sophisticated ideas into ideas that can be applied by brands and businesses of any size, with any size team and any scale. And so I'd love to hear from both of you what you believe the top takeaways are here for experienced strategists. Let's start with you, Catherine.
So I would say the best value we can offer as brand strategists, and there's plenty of brand strategy companies out there. So the thing that's really going to make a difference when it comes to having that really good synergy with brand experience is making sure you really define that character beyond the personality. So much deeper, much more visceral. And then the other thing is defining the actions so that you're thinking about what actions the brand's going to take when it comes to dealing with different people in different moments. Those two things, people and moments. And then finally, thinking about acting as a coach as opposed to acting as a controller, because we come up with all the theory, but we're not the people doing it in practice. So instead of seeing a competition with brand experience partners, see it more as a partnership and really be there to kind of be the catalyst for them to go and do what they do best. So it's a little bit at the service of brand experience and making sure we deliver better tools and be the catalyst for that conversation, that collaboration.
Agree on all points. Dave?
Well, one of the things that this conversation has brought to the fore for me is that empowering employees has all kinds of benefits. It helps you, it can become a key differentiator, as we saw with the snooze example that Catherine provided. But it can also be a way to accomplish more. And when you simplify the offering, but at the same time empower the employees, you can deal with very difficult situations or challenges that might arise because the offering is simple and the employee is empowered. Those are beautiful things. However, if you're going to empower the employees, you need to make sure that you are also at the same time providing the right infrastructure, sorry, Southwest, so that they can actually deliver. And there's a lot of complexity that employee empowerment requires today because we have so many channels, we have so much going on that companies really do need to invest and make sure that those empowered employees have the best tools to help them to accomplish what it is that they're trying to accomplish. I think that's really interesting. Our conversation has been about brand and experience, and yet at the same time, one of the things that we're seeing is that they can only come together if the company provides the right kind of technological support, the right kind of empowerment, and the right kind of character so that we can work together.
I love that.
Yeah. It really is an investment for the good of the customer and the company. And I think, as always, we find our truest ideas when they hold true for the employee, the brand, and the customer. And when there is a win in the decision for all three, we know we're on the right track. Catherine, thank you so much for being here and bringing your deep well of experience to the conversation. To all of you listening, I hope you'll experiment with these ideas and tell us what you find. We are so excited to continue learning from you what you are learning in your business from your customer about what works, what doesn't, and what's coming down the road. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Experience Strategy Podcast. If you're having fun nerding out with us, please follow and share wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Find more episodes and continue the conversation with us at experiencestrategypodcast.com.